West Virginia mountain melody. There's a new river singing to me. Oh, this time it's wild and free, your West Virginia mountain melodies.
Welcome to another edition of Around and About the Clarksburg History Museum. And we are on the road today in the Summit Park area of Clarksburg to talk about some of the rich heritage of immigrants that have made up our great city. And today we're going to discuss the Greek immigrants to Clarksburg. And my special guest today is Maria Alex. Maria, thank you so much for joining us
You're
today.
welcome. I'm very happy to do this.
And she's going to tell our listeners a little bit about why the Greeks came to Clarksburg into this area and what brought them and the rich heritage, and about their beautiful church that I just had the honor of going into and getting a wonderful tour of. So first of all, Maria, tell us where you're located at in Summit Park.
We are located when you come to the old school. It used to be the old Summit Park School.
It's now City Windows.
City Windows. You take a left at City Windows and go down the road about maybe half a mile, and we're located on the right side. There's a sign outside that says St. Spyridon Greek Orthodox Church.
And you have a Facebook page, correct?
Yes, we do.
Okay. If someone wanted to visit your church or get more information about it, how did they go about doing that? Would the Facebook page be the best way?
Either there, or they can just come to church services on Sunday morning. We have the 10:30.
Okay.
Is our service, and everybody's welcome to come.
And give us a little history, first of all, of what brought the Greek immigrants to Clarksburg, and just sort of how they came here. Can you give me that history?
Yes. At the beginning of the 20th century, the early Greek immigrants were trying to escape religious, cultural, and political persecution from the former Ottoman Empire. And there was a lack of economic opportunity, a lot of famine. Many of the families had their properties confiscated. They were driven away from their homes. A lot of the young men decided to leave because the Ottoman Turks were trying to take them into their army. Some of the young girls were also taken and put into you got this.
Almost like a concentration camp in a way.
Well, not
maybe?
really. No, they were just taken.
Were they like enslaved?
Enslaved. They were enslaved.
Enslaved. Okay.
And so many of the young men decided to leave and come to America for a better future. At that time, there was a factory in Summit Park, which was a tin mill, and Mr. Weir, who later on moved the company to Weirton, and it became Weirton Steel, advertised in Greece, Italy, Spain, looking for immigrant workers to bring over, and that's how a lot of the Greek they were young men at the time, 15, 18, 20 years old, decided to come here and work in the tin mill. And that's why most of the Greek families settled around Summit Park. And it was called Tin Plate at that time also, besides Summit Park, because of the tin mill. And they
about what year would this have been? Like
early
1914?
Between 1910 and 1920, mostly. And they were young boys then. They were 15, just like I said, 15, 18, 20 years old. And a lot of them lived together in small apartments that were, as soon as you come into Summit Park from the bowling alley, there were little small homes right there, and they lived there together. They roomed together.
Like a little
they were boarding houses, and 5 or 6 of them would live together. There was a little creek that came down from when you come into Summit Park there was a little creek between the houses, and they would walk down. You could walk between the houses and walk back up and come up to here where the church was. They decided someone came up with the idea of building a church. And the man who came up with the idea when they started to build the church, the man had left. He decided to move, but he was the original Nicholas Daramaris, envisioned building a church here, and he was considered the founder of the of St. Spyridon. The cost of a church at that time was $35,000, which was a lot of money, and so they charged everybody 50 cents. Those were their dues, 50 cents a month, which was not a lot of money, but for that time it was, for them that was a lot. The men worked in the steel mill. It was a very dirty business, and they had a lot of ovens in there where they that they used for their for doing working with the steel, and
Now, I did not know what tin plate was. I had to Google
it's
this.
a sheet. Yes, it was. What was it? A sheet metal?
Well, I took it to be, at that time, there used to be a lot of tin ceilings. And I think they made that. I think they made a lot of pots and pans, the thin, steel for that kind of thing.
Yes.
And that would have been a hot factory
very
job
hot,
to have
very
worked
hot.
in. And smoky.
Okay, according to the history of it, it made turn roofing, enameling material, galvanizing stock, and all kinds of uncoated plates. I think the men who started it came from Pennsylvania, somewhere in Pennsylvania, and brought their company down here, and there were a lot of skilled workers that were working on this. They chose Clarksburg because of we have the rivers here. They needed water.
Now, I have a little information on this tin plate mill. Do you want me to kind of tell you what I found out?
Yes.
I didn't realize that this was actually started in 1901, and it was the Jackson Sheet and Tin Plate Company. And T.M. Jackson was the president of it. They purchased 10 acres of land over here. And they put 5 different buildings equipped with all the machinery on it. And they operated until 1904, and then they declared bankruptcy, and they sold it at public auction. And it was bought by the bondholders, who then sold that company to a Pittsburgh capitalist group in 1905. So that's kind of where J.R. Phillips, he came here from Pittsburgh to operate the plant, and then they named it the Phillips Sheet and Tin Plate Company. And he had a personal secretary, and a treasurer was D.M. Weir. Well, Mr. Phillips was killed suddenly in a terrible train accident, so that left this tin plate mill with no one to manage it. So Mr. Weir agreed to take over the operations. And this is how, which I did not realize this was the amazing start of Mr. Weir's career, because he started right here in Clarksburg with this tin plate company, and he went on to start Weirton Steel. And now I understood that the plant here in Clarksburg was later changed to Weirton Steel Company at one time, and it went up to 1939 before it closed and everything moved to Weirton. Do we know what came after that? It left in 1939. What took over that?
I'm not sure what took over that.
Yeah, I'm not real sure, but now it's the Lockheed location. So that was pretty interesting, I thought, because I never knew Weirton Steel kind of started here, right in Clarksburg.
Yes.
Now, these workers that came over, did they have these type of factories in Greece?
No.
So they were learning a whole new skill.
There was nothing like that in Greece.
And I suppose they didn't learn.
Most of them were farmers, I think.
Farmers, okay. And I suppose they didn't know English, right?
Not at all. They knew no English.
What do you know? Some of the early families that first settled right in this area. Some of the names. Do you have that? Or started the church?
Some of the early families were Mascus, Evangelinuses, Anastasakis, Placoteras, Simeratus. When they did the groundbreaking of the church in 1918 and elected officers for the First Parish Council, Alexander Polikas was chosen as the first president, was elected the first president. And his son, Paul Polikas, later he became a lawyer in downtown Clarksburg. So they were a pretty well-established family in Clarksburg. After the groundbreaking, I think the first church service was in 1920, and all the families got together and
Tell me the story you were telling me earlier about the bricks for the church. Where did those bricks
I recently found out that the bricks used to build the church were in the steel mill, in the tin mill, and they had ovens that they used to bake the steel, where they fired up the materials, and when they were done, they would tear those ovens down. So the steel mill donated the bricks to the Greek immigrants, and they carried them up in wheelbarrows to this location where they built the church. The original bricks stayed on the church until 1986 when we consecrated the church, and then we re-bricked the whole thing because the bricks were deteriorating. So it's the brick that's on there now is a new brick. The front of the church was just a small step, a couple of steps that came down, and at that time, again, 1986, we took that off and built the narthex. The entrance into the church is called the narthex. And we built the narthex that's there now. So when you see the two windows, empty windows, when you go inside, that was the original wall, the outside wall of the church. And we built it out to make it a little larger. And then made the walkway accessible for wheelchair, because before there were steps that went up. The church, I think at that time, cost about $35,000. Like I said, that was a lot of money. In 1918, they all got together and had the groundbreaking. And the first priest who served St. Spyridon was Father Parthenios Kalonis, and he came from Martins Ferry and Wheeling. I'm assuming I don't know what he took to come down. There weren't buses at that time. Maybe a train. I don't think the train came that way. He got here somehow. He came down and did wedding ceremonies, baptisms, funerals, church services. And I'm assuming at that time, they probably did them in somebody's home because there was no church here. But he traveled back and forth. He's on the records that he was here. He had come from Greece and ended up in Milwaukee, and then somehow he got here. He was transferred to Martins Ferry, where he built that church with his own money. He built the one in Martins Ferry. And from the church records, you can see that from 1910 to 1918, he was traveling back and forth to do the different services. After they built the outside of the church, the inside, the icon stand that's in front, the screen that's in front of the altar, was built and carved by a couple of gentlemen who worked at the steel mill. And at that time, that was a big job to do all that carving.
It is so beautiful.
And then whoever they brought an artist to do the icons, to paint the icons. We write icons. It's because it's a story, and the icons they're venerated. They are not worshipped. Like God is the only person who is worshipped. The rest they're venerated, and the icon stand is the original icon stand that was built at that time. And the men stood on they had pews that went around the side, not pews. There were chairs that went around the side of the church, where the men stood. The women stood in the middle. They stood, men on one side and women on the other. There were no pews. Everybody stood, because in Greece everybody stands in Greece. There aren't pews like we have here. They still have those little stands around the outside of outside wall. And the name of the church was given by Mr. Anastasakis, Stelios Anastasakis, because the completion of the church was close to the saints' feast day, which was December 12th. At that time, they were going by the old calendar, the Greek families. And December 12th was Christmas Day here with the new calendar. So they decided to have the first service on the Feast of Saint Spyridon, which was December 12th. And because everything was closed on that day because it was Christmas Day here, all the men were able to come to the service. So when you see the picture of the groundbreaking, everybody's, all the families are there together. They honored Saint Spyridon and gave him the name of the church. And the very first Divine Liturgy was celebrated December 12th, 1920, and it was with Father Parthenios Kolonis and another priest who had come, Father Anthony Papadimitriou. And this Father Papadimitriou was assigned to Saint Spyridon as, our first priest.
Did he live here?
He lived here. There was a little house. No, that little house wasn't there yet. After they built the hall, there was a little place that was up above that he lived in. I think there was a little home that was up above here also that the priests lived in, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure what how that was at that time.
And the church is in very close proximity to where the factory is.
Yes, it was walkable. Yes, it was right here. And that was the reason most of the families, the Greek families, settled in Summit Park, because the husbands were working, the young men were working there, and they eventually married and settled here. A lot of the men went back to Greece and brought a bride from Greece, someone that they knew, a family, family acquaintance, or someone that they had known from, before, and brought her here, and they settled here and had their families here.
That always fascinates me, Maria, how as a young person, I couldn't do it.
I mean, these men were young.
Yeah, young, and leave everything you've known, all your family.
Many of them never went back.
And never
Many
go back.
Many never went back, never saw their parents again, or their siblings, their families.
What courage that took.
And to come to America at that time on a ship took 30 days. It was about 30 days. And it was a grueling trip. And you're not, you weren't in first class either. You weren't upstairs and even then, that was a long, long trip, because the boat left Greece. You had to go to another city in Greece, either Patras or Athens, and embark on the boat there. And then it usually stopped in Naples, and maybe it stopped in Gibraltar. There were stops along the way. It wasn't just a straight, trip straight to New York City or Baltimore, whichever you chose to stop in.
Yeah, I've often wondered, could I ever do that? I don't think that I could.
They did.
How brave.
They were very. And when they got to New York City, most of them had a tag around their neck, and it said, to NY. So it said Tony to New York. So they knew where they were going. When they got to New York, there was a gentleman here who helped the immigrants come from New York to Clarksburg.
Oh, okay.
So there was a P.O. box number. There was a post office box, and it was 428. And Mr. Alexander Xenakis used that box number for years. It was, I think it was his father's, and the post office was located on 3rd Street. So anybody who came into Clarksburg on the train was directed to go to this post office, and there was a gentleman there who would pick them up. They had the P.O. box number, with them on a piece of paper, and he found housing for them. He helped them get established in Clarksburg. So that it was not easy.
No.
It was not easy.
And you have to think, what was so bad, because my own immigrant family, what was so bad in the old country that you left everything and you wanted to come to America?
It was bad.
It was bad, and you just had to go somewhere else, and America was the promised land.
Yes.
And they had a good life here, and they raised beautiful families and had nice homes, and and businesses and everything. So, I mean, I really am indebted to those immigrants of all nationalities to come here and do that.
Because we wouldn't be here.
That's exactly right.
We would not be here.
That's exactly right.
So many of them, like my father-in-law, who came in 1912, and worked, but he worked in a restaurant. He worked downtown in a restaurant. It was the Clarksburg restaurant, and it was located on 3rd Street. And eventually, I'm not sure if it caught on fire. For some reason, they moved it to Pike Street, and it became the Manhattan Restaurant. They renamed it. And there were 7 partners. They were all of them were immigrants, and they either knew how to cook or how to serve. Or the Manhattan Restaurant was this one side was a long aisle, had a big long counter that went all the way down the restaurant, and then the other side, where Skazik's Cleaners opened later on, that was the dining room.
Oh, okay.
And they had a dining room that was first class with white tablecloths. The waiters wore the white aprons. They had the white linens, everything. And eventually, in the early 50s, my in-laws took over it. The other partners either died or had moved away, weren't interested anymore, so they bought them out. And then in 1954, Skazik's Cleaners moved into that. They closed the dining room part, and it became the Skazik Cleaners, and they just left the one with the aisle, the bar, the counter that went all the way down. And the Manhattan Restaurant never closed. They were open 24 hours a day, never had a key. And when we got married in 1977, they had to find a locksmith to make a key to lock the doors so everybody could go to the wedding, who could come to the wedding.
The Greeks had some tremendous restaurants here in town, didn't they?
The gentlemen that worked in the tin mill decided to leave that kind of business where they were and went downtown and opened up restaurants.
The Terminal Restaurant, was that one of them?
Yes, that was the Millers.
Of course, Sanitary Hot Dog.
Yes.
You talk to anyone back then.
Coney Island, the Victory Billiards.
Where were they
Was
located?
on the corner of Pike Street and 3rd Street, that big building, the stone building that's there. And across the street was the post office. The city hall was there at that time, where Bland's drugstore was.
Uh-huh.
It was on that corner. And then there was Gus's photo was next to the Sanitary Hot Dog. He had a photo shop that everybody went to. Before Jerry's Auto came in, it was on that side.
Those are the ones that all burned, right, at one time.
And below that was Kaplan Jewelry. They were on Pike Street before they moved to Main Street. And then there was a bakery and working man's store. So there were a lot of, Pike Street was booming. Well, Main Street was too. Clarksburg was booming at that time.
It's hard for younger people to know how it used to be.
You can't envision it.
Where did you grow up?
In Clarksburg, downtown Clarksburg, up behind WI High School.
And what did your parents do?
My father owned a Sanitary Hot Dog.
Oh, okay.
He and his brother ran it.
Okay. What was his name?
Pete.
Pete
Kotzabaris.
Okay.
And Nick was my uncle, his brother. And
did you work in sanitary?
no, I wasn't allowed to.
Oh.
Because they sold beer.
Ah, okay.
He didn't want us in there because, a lot of the customers weren't.
Do you have the recipe for the chili? Because I've
No,
heard
we
how
tried
wonderful.
to get it. We tried to get it, and my husband and I went up to help him make it one morning. He was getting dementia at that time, and he woke up at 5 o'clock and made the chili. So we never got to see what was in it. What my mother tried to write down, what she thought was in there, and so my brother makes it, but it's not exactly,
It never
it's not
is,
exactly
though,
the
is
same, but he's pretty close.
Like my mom can
just
give
tried
me a
to-
recipe of something she's made for
No.
50 years, and I'll try to make it. It's never the same.
That always happens. You can never make it the same, but it's pretty close.
So walking down Main Street when you were growing up, just mention some of the
Oh, my
beautiful
gosh.
shops and
Oh, the Kitty Shop, CC Keys, Crichton Music. I was in there all the time because I played the piano. And Freelanders was on this side, Woolworth, Grant's, Lerner Shop, McCrory's, Murphy's. G.C. Murphy had the little store outside the Salvation Army,
The little booth.
the little booth outside at Christmas time. The basements of those stores, McCrory's and Murphy's, had all the toys were down there. And at Christmas time, Santa Claus was down there. At Easter, they had the little chickens, the little colored chicks.
Yeah, they die 'em.
And they had a back door. So when you go through Trader's Alley, you could go in from the back. And we walked to town from up on the hill where we lived by ourselves. I would not let my children walk to town today.
No.
We walked to town. We would go to the movie theaters for a quarter and 6 Pepsi caps, pop caps. And
there were more than one theater.
The Ritz Theater, the Robinson Grand. The Orpheum was on Main Street, but I don't remember going to it. The other one was on 4th Street.
Moore's Opera House.
Moore's Opera House. Saturday mornings they had cartoons for the children, and we would go to that. The library, we loved the library. I was there a lot.
When it was at the Waldemore?
At the Waldemore. And I remember in high school, in my junior year, my English teacher was Virginia Lee Nutter. And we would go after school to do our homework, and she would come in to see who was there studying. And then she would mention it the next day. You know, so-and-so was at the library.
So you knew you probably better be there.
You know you better be there working.
Did you go to WI?
I went to Towers, and I went to Central Junior High School, and then I went to WI. When I started school, I couldn't speak English. I didn't know a word of English. My mother didn't speak English, so we spoke Greek at home. And but I remember in 2nd grade, I was helping somebody read, because she always had a helper helping, the children who couldn't read very well. And I remember doing that, helping somebody read. And I also, because I was very bashful, I didn't talk a lot, I took elocution lessons from Miss Hogan. She was a 2nd grade teacher, and she taught elocution, which was like public speaking, to learn how to speak. And we had a little notebook with all these poems that we had to learn. I started taking piano lessons when I was 5, 6, from Ruby Marshall Scott. And she was located behind J.C. Penney. It's a little house behind, it's on Washington Avenue, the one that has the little weather vane on top. It's always going around.
Okay.
That's how I remember it.
Okay.
And I took piano lessons from her till I was, I think, 18, a lot of years. And I remember the arcade.
I was going to ask
downtown.
you that, because
Yes.
I just talked with Joe Gonzalez recently about that fire.
The arcade was where J.C. Penney was later on. And I don't know what's not there. Nothing's there now.
I don't think.
We used to walk through the arcade, and there were all kinds of stores in there. Because it was, coming from home from up on South 7th Street, you walked down and you went through the arcade and came out on Main Street. So,
Do you remember the Stonewall Jackson Hotel?
Oh, the Stonewall Jackson was, Friday nights was seafood night. And we would go down on Friday night and have lobster, crabs, whatever. It was very elegant, really, really nice. And we would go down there and eat on Fridays. That was their specialty. I remember O'Day's up on Pike Street. They had the Parrot in the front when you went. O'Day's was a seafood house, where Southern States is now. And you walked in, and there was a parrot there in a big cage, and he would talk. That was the.
We recently
that was fun.
We just saw a picture of that place and didn't realize that was the original train station.
O'Day's?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
All the way up there?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't
That's
remember
interesting.
O'Day's. I remember it burned, but I don't remember ever going in
My grandfather
there.
used to take us. We didn't have a car. My father didn't drive. My grandfather had a car. He had an old, it was a 1948 DeSoto that he bought from Ed Toompas. Ed Toompas ran Bland's drugstore. Ed Toompas was going to the Army, and he was leaving, and he needed to sell his car. It was a 1948 DeSoto. It was beautiful, brand new, so my grandfather bought it. And that's the car we had. And at that time, no seat belts, no nothing. We stood up in the car, nobody sat strapped in or anything. And he would call my mother like 4 or 5 o'clock. He said, "I'm coming home, get the kids ready." And he would take us to Sunset Drive-In, because they had playground for the kids. That was out on 19. That was, a
good
drive,
ways.
a good
Yeah,
drive.
it was a good ways.
Or we go to the park drive-in on the Buchanan Road.
Now tell
because they
about
had
that.
ducks. They had ducks
Didn't
out
they
there.
have a little train that went around?
Yes, they had a train. They had a pond with all the ducks. We take food to feed the ducks, and it was a drive-in theater. But they had and then the Ellis Drive-In, the same thing. Ellis Drive-In had they had a playground there in the front, and they had the restaurant. And the restaurant, you pulled up with your car and had the speaker. You hooked it onto your window, and we would all be talking in Greek. And Mr. Ellis he knew my grandfather, and from the restaurants, and he said, is that you?" Because he would hear us. He knew everybody was speaking a foreign language. And so those are things I remember.
Wonderful days.
We didn't go to we didn't go into Bridgeport. We didn't know anybody there, so we went to.
Well, there wasn't a whole lot in Bridgeport.
No, there wasn't.
I mean, Stockyards. I
remember
went there,
the Stockyards, but
at that time, Bridgeport didn't have a lot of things like Clarksburg
no.
had. And Christmas time in Clarksburg, the streets would just
wonderful.
be packed.
It was wonderful. You walked, you went down and walked. We walked around. We went shopping. Monday nights or Friday nights were open. All the stores were open until late.
And the beautiful storefronts were decorated.
Gorgeous.
It was like New York City.
Parson Souders. The best one was Palace Furniture because they had the toy. They had like a toy store on the side. And they had all kinds of toys in there and Santa Claus and just beautiful things, which, you can't describe it today because
you had to live it.
You can't vision that. James and Law, I used to love James and Law because they had books.
Yeah, you went there beginning of school to get all your books.
At the beginning of school, you had your list, and the line was all the way back behind the Union National Bank, all the way down 3rd Street. And you would be waiting there. I was so excited because you got to buy all these new books and, a bottle of paste and a ruler and pencils.
Your Zahner Blosser pen.
Zahner Blosser pen, yes.
Now, what did you do for a living before you retired?
I taught school. I taught Family and Consumer Sciences, which was home economics.
Oh, okay.
At Liberty High School. I was there 30 years.
Did you have to go around to the students in the summertime to check on their projects?
No,
I had that at RW.
We didn't have that. I think they must have done away with that at that time. I mean, after when I started. I started teaching school in Frenchton, West Virginia, which is past Buchanan,
Yes.
where the French Creek Game Farm is. There's a road that goes to the right, and it was like 2 miles out in the country. I'm talking country. And the homes were like a mile apart. There was no neighbor, next to you. And it was a 2-room school. Mr. Wilfong was the principal. He taught grades 5 and 6. I taught 1, 2, 3, and 4. I only had 24 students, but they were in 4 grades. And no telephone. There was a bathroom and a kitchen. We had a cook. And every afternoon we played softball. That was recess. You went out in the afternoon and played softball. If you wanted to make a phone call, you had to go to the corner store, which was a mile away. You had to walk down the road. And
did you have to travel back and forth?
I drove back and forth until maybe December. And then there was a family a man and his wife in Buchanan who were going to Florida for the winter and wanted somebody to watch their home. So I stayed in their house until school was over, which was nice.
Yeah, so you didn't have that drive in the
winter was bad, driving out there. But
and how long were you there?
I was there just 1 year because then they closed the school the next year.
Oh, okay.
So I came back here and I got a job teaching remedial reading, and I was at Norwood, Hepzibah, Zeesing, and Anmore in grade school. I had the younger children from grades 1 to 6. And then in 77, I got hired as a home economics teacher at Liberty High School, and I was there till 2009.
Do you miss it?
And it was, not a little bit, not at the beginning, not now, no. We had wonderful years. Mr. Curry was wonderful, our principal.
I've heard of Mr. Curry.
Had the most fun years with him.
Do you ever hear from your students, any of the students?
Yes.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, we're good friends with Jeff DeQuinna that's on that Connect Bridgeport, and lots of them. I see a lot of students.
When the Greeks first came here, did they have a school here?
In 1922, I think when they started to build the hall, they wanted to have something so that they could, well, they wanted to learn English, first of all. So I think a few of the men got together and they, I'm not sure if I think they did it in somebody's home at the beginning. They wanted so they could learn English. But then in 22, when they built the hall, yes, they had a Greek school. And, most of the Greeks taught their children Greek. They spoke Greek at home. Mm-hmm. So most of the Greek children, from back then spoke Greek, like me. And so we had a Greek school, and usually the priest taught Greek school.
Oh, okay.
There were a couple of other, ladies later on that taught Greek school, but mostly the priest did. And, they were pretty well educated. And so, then they put on plays. They did, March 25th, Greek Independence Day. That was a big deal. And everybody learned poems. We recited poems. We did, little programs. We sang songs. Christmas time, there was always some kind of, with the Sunday school, there was some type of program. But yes, the Greeks carried on their Greek traditions, their language, their, the cooking skills and all that. And then I think that at one time in the early 40s, there wasn't anyone to teach Greek, so they brought someone from, I think from Baltimore. They brought a lady to teach Greek for the summer. Oh, okay. Kids don't want to go to school in the summertime. No. They had summer Greek school.
I have to ask you about the cooking, since you mentioned that. Some of the Greek food, your food festivals are a tradition.
Yes.
You're going to have one this year, though.
We're only having it for one day on September 13th. Tentatively, that's what we're planning. And we're only going to have two items. The gyro, that's in the pita bread. The gyro sandwich, I think potato chips, a salad, a drink, and baklava. And the other one is the souvlaki, like the shish kebab on the stick.
Oh, okay.
It's the same thing, the same things with that. So there are only going to be two items. I think we're going to open the dining hall so people can stay and eat if they want.
And when is this going to be?
September 13th. I think it's a Friday. We're just going to do a one day. Fridays seem to be, better because people are still working and they order out for lunch. Saturdays people have things to do, family things or ball games or whatever. So Friday seems to be a better day.
Do you have plenty of volunteers to help you, or?
So far, yes. For now, we do. It's pretty good. We haven't been able to do the dining because after the pandemic, we did drive-in. Drive up, and people just took their items and went home. I think we have enough help for that this year.
If someone wants information on that, check your website.
It's on the website. It should be, yes, it's on our Facebook page, and a lot of us have shared that page, so it's on our Facebook page. But there's the church Facebook page should have that, and the website. It should be on both of those.
I look forward to that.
It'll have, it'll list the times.
Do you make the little spinach?
We're not doing that for this time.
No.
We make those for our Phillips bake sale. Like I told you earlier, our ladies organization is called the Ladies Phillips Society, and Phillips means Friends of the Poor, and we do a lot of what do you call it?
Like charitable.
Charitable work around Clarksburg, around this area. We donate a lot to the Pittsburgh metropolis, to the Archdiocese National Philoptochos. We do our fall bake sale, which is in November before Thanksgiving. That's where we do the baklava, the spinach pies, the cheese pies, and kulurakia, the little cookies. So that will be, that's usually the week before Thanksgiving.
And you were mentioning to me earlier just some of the organizations around here in Clarksburg that
we help out the Shepherd's Corner, the Mission Downtown, the Salvation Army, the Food Bank, the West Virginia Food Bank. We donate to them also. Ronald McDonald House.
That's
those are
wonderful,
the, those
Maria.
are the few that are around here. And then we have the Metropolis and the National. There's emergency funds, the medical fund, Heart Association, cancer, autism.
There's so
There's
many
several.
people in
There are
need,
a lot.
and this congregation really helps them out.
Yes, yes.
How many folks do you have in your congregation presently?
Oh, let's see. We have right now we have 40 families. We have, I think, 8 or 9 who are out of town. Who were former parishioners, but they still belong to our church. They still help us out, and we're getting a lot of converts. We've had a lot of converts the last few years, and we still have several that are that are coming up. Very few Greek families left. We have two immigrants, ladies, Olga and Sophia, who are still living. Everybody else is gone. They're the two of the original immigrants.
What are their last names?
Alastanis, Olga Alastanis and Sophia Alastanis.
And how old are they?
And I think Olga is 90. I'm going to say 93. I think they're both about the same age, close to the same age.
And where did they work at?
At Broda's.
At
They
Broda's.
worked at Broda's, and they were both seamstresses. They both came from the island of Chios and married 2 brothers. Most of the immigrants were from the island of Chios in Greece, which is off the coast of Asia Minor, which is now Turkey. Some of them came from the island of Kos, which is down lower, close to Rhodes. And several families came from the middle of Greece, from Thessaly, from up in the mainland.
Have you been to Greece?
About, I think, 12 times.
Is it similar
I
to
still
the way it looks
still
here?
have very different.
Oh,
A lot of
okay.
ocean.
Oh, okay.
Well, the islands are, they're beautiful. I still have a lot of family, a lot of cousins. I have one brother here, and the rest of my family's in Greece
Oh, really?
and Australia.
Do you see them often?
Last time I saw them was last summer, 2019. My husband and I went. He has a big family also, but some of his family's here, but they were a large family. But I have a lot of cousins still there.
When they came from Greece, would they have been shocked of the cultural change
Oh
here?
yes, oh yes.
It would have
I'm
been
sure.
like a alien coming in.
Very alien, especially since they didn't speak any English. They back then they thought of America. America was the land of milk and honey, and they didn't realize when they came here they had to work hard. It was very difficult.
And learn
much. And to try to learn a language, and some didn't, like my mother. And most of them became American citizens. They were very proud. They were proud immigrants. They came here and they wanted to, blend into the culture. And my dad came in 1920. I think he became a citizen in 1925, so it wasn't very long.
No.
He spoke English very well. He learned it. And then in 1938, he went back to Greece. His parents were still living. He got to see his parents before the war. He went over and saw his sister, who he hadn't seen because she was born, I think she was born after he left, his youngest sister. And then he came back here and joined the Army. And he was in northern Africa, I think southern France. I don't think he was in Italy, mostly northern Africa, but he spoke Turkish. He learned English here. He spoke Greek, Turkish, Arabic,
That's
and
amazing.
I told him he should have been an interpreter. He should have come here and become a. And so he was, and then after the war, they had closed the borders, so, people couldn't come over for several years. But because he was a veteran, he had been in the, he was a serviceman, he was allowed to bring my mother over. Well, it wasn't, we called him our grandfather, but he was really my mother's great uncle. It was across the street at the Coney Island, and he said, I have a niece in Greece, she's single, and so they started writing to each other, wrote letters to each other, and they brought her over in January of 1947. She was on that boat for 30 days, and she said she was so sick all the time and that didn't eat a thing. She was downstairs because you were not, with the upstairs population. And she got off the boat and she said she was so skinny. She was wondering, what was he going to think when he sees this, skinny girl come off the boat? Well, they docked on Friday, and my father and grandfather didn't know that they had to put down $500 that if they didn't like each other, she had her fare to go back to Greece. So they had to wait in Castle Island for the weekend. They put all these, young women in this place, and they had no idea what was going on. They couldn't speak the language. So then Monday morning, they finally went and paid this money. Got up, went up to the ship to pick her up, and she said all these brides were standing around because there were other young ladies there that were going to meet. So my father, they met each other on that day on the boat.
The first time they'd seen each other.
I'm so skinny, I look awful. He goes, honey, I love you anyway. That was written in one of the articles.
That's great.
So they went. They stayed with some relatives in New York. She found a wedding gown, and they got married on Sunday.
Isn't that amazing?
They knew each other 5 days.
And they were married how long?
And they got, 52 years, I think, when he passed away. And they got on the train and came to Clarksburg.
Isn't that something? That's courage, isn't it?
And so many of the young girls, that's how they ended up in Clarksburg. They met someone or knew someone, or the young man went back to Greece and, knew her from a family, knew their family and brought the brides here.
And had long marriages.
Long marriages, and they thought they were coming to paradise.
And how many brothers and sisters in the family?
I have a brother. I had a sister who passed away when she was 14. And so that's just he and I are the only ones surviving here.
That's beautiful.
And,
yeah, I just keep coming back to that what courage these young people had to do this.
They did. And many of the families, that's how they got here. My mother-in-law was 10 when she came. Her mother died when she was 7. And her father, she had a brother and a sister. Her father remarried like a year later. And they lived in a village up in the middle of Greece with no electricity, no running water. And it was still that way in 1980 when we went. We went with my son, he was 2. And we were there, so 8 o'clock you went to bed because you couldn't see, you couldn't do anything after that. And he remarried, and they came here in 1920. And when she was 14, she was engaged to my father-in-law because, she was beautiful. She wanted to go to school. She wanted to finish high school. And they were afraid that, somebody's going to, swindle her and whatever. She was a young girl and she was pretty. So they had to marry her off. That was back then, you had to get married young. This was young. And so she was a mother at 16. She had my sister-in-law when she was 16. He was 32.
Oh, really?
My father-in-law was 32. She was 15 when they got engaged. So many of the marriages started that way.
That's how it was,
Young, yes.
Yeah, my grandmother got married when she was 15.
Can't imagine. That's, you're a teenager.
Yeah, but you're thrown right into life.
With a man that's 32, you just met, or you said you're going to marry him.
And that was it. You did it.
Yes.
That's amazing. Well, it's just so interesting how things were and how people were. Before I close, I was looking at the clock here. I wanted to read this little article I found out of the newspaper from Clarksburg Telegram from July of 1916. And it was about the second annual picnic of the tin plate workers. And it was held at Norwood Park. But the thing that fascinated me about this was they had a big parade of more than 1,000 people in line for that parade through Clarksburg. Now imagine 1,000 people, and all the workers from that tin plate factory marched in the parade. but it was headed by the chief of police, who was Harry Brooks, and he had his entire police force mounted on horses in this parade. And they had several different regimental bands, including the Italian Marine Band.
I just saw that.
Yeah. So I thought that was interesting. And then some of the people that participated in the parade, I just wanted to read these names in case there's any listeners that might have some family, because I'm not familiar with some of these names. Walter Shakespeare was the Grand Marshal of that parade. And other well-known millmen were Edward Bell, J.E. Marple, C. Newth, N-E-U-T-H, I think is how that's pronounced, C. Hedrick, Samuel Roginson, and Thomas Madden. And they even had special streetcars that ran from Gulf Plaza to take the people to the Norwood Park for the activities. They had a big ox roast there and all kind of sporting events. I mean, it was a big deal.
At 100-yard dash?
Yeah, 100-yard dash. And they had like this in the newspaper for like 3 weeks, way ahead of that.
Oh my gosh.
So I just thought that was so interesting.
They had a tug of war with single men versus married men.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and I thought, oh, what a fun time must have been.
Is.
But it was such a big deal.
Wow.
But I'm afraid, Maria, my clock is telling me we have to wrap it up.
Fine.
And if someone wants to learn more about your church or the activities going on there, go to the Facebook website and look at that. And it's just been a real joy talking to you. I've really enjoyed that. And the tour of the church was just the icing on the cake.
I'm glad you enjoyed it.
I want to ask you, how do you say thank you in Greece?
Ευχαριστώ.
Okay, I'm not going to attempt that, but thank you. Thank you so much for your time and doing that. I've really enjoyed this.
I did too.
And I encourage each of you to visit our Clarksburg History Museum on Main Street in downtown Clarksburg. Visit Summit Park, come to the Greek Festival, come to the church. It's just beautiful. It's breathtaking. And I just want to close with this thought that make each and every day count, because you are making history today. And thank you. This is Martha Jett. Thank you very much for joining us.
West Virginia mountain melody, there's a new river singing to me. Oh, this time it's wild and free, your West Virginia mountain